Get quiet, please. Did you hear me shout there, my children?
Yes, I love that. I thought you were talking to me. I love that.
It's like quiet on set. We're live. Listen, welcome back to MediaSnack live from New York.
Greetings from London.
So we have a big question this week, and in this episode, we'll give you some 3 things to think about that. So what's the big question of the week? We just had it up on screen.
Are remote agency pitches here to stay?
Yes, very good question, and thank you for sending that in.
Yep.
So we'll get into that. We'll give you 3 major things to think about if you're thinking about pitching in the year ahead. Awesome. Well, listen, welcome back to MediaSnack. If you are new to the channel, it's great to have you join us. Thank you. MediaSnack is a live weekly show where we unpack questions that you all have around media, agencies, marketing, and much more. You can subscribe to below to be updated every time we go live every week. So you know. So on to the question of the week. Remember, we're streaming live. We stream live every Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. UK, and around the world. And we love it when you leave comments during the show because we can react to that. Let's build that into the discussion. So, David, over to you.
So we've talked a lot about pitches over the last 4 or 5 years, Tom. In particular, today we're going to be talking about remote pitches and the practice of conducting pitches without actually seeing or being in the same room as your clients, or your prospective clients, or as your prospective agency partners. And is that here to stay?
Yeah. So let's unpack that, and then we'll come on to our tips. So it's been quite a lot of discussion around this, as you might imagine. There's been more pitches in 2021 than there were in 2020.
Yeah.
And almost without exception, those have been conducted remotely. And going into the lockdown and the being forced to run pitches remotely, which we were able to pivot to pretty quickly as a company, we were able to do that pretty well, I think. The big question is, do you lose something between trying to forge relationships between marketers and their agencies by not being together in person? And in fact, the net of it really is that it's enabled us to remove from pitches some of the stuff which really didn't aspire to that ambition.
Yeah,
wasn't really necessary. Had an opportunity to get rid of that stuff and really focus on how we want to innovate that search or that pitch process. So we've been running pitches for over 10 years for major advertisers around the world. So we kind of know this stuff, and we've watched the evolution of pitches over that time. And they improve every year. Every pitch we do, we try to kind of refine, learn, improve the process. And that's been our commitment to clients, right? To improve the process. We have this culture within ID Comms of continuous incremental improvement. We're never settled. We're trying to improve the process the whole time. So it's been really interesting under those conditions to see how we can kind of evolve the process. The first thing is, I'll maybe share some of the benefits of moving remotely. The first thing is that it's become actually a lot more democratic. Literally in the sense that on screen, everyone gets the same, real estate, and everyone's visible and can see the whole team. And that's kind of important. You might feel under the spotlight a little bit, and that can be uncomfortable if you're on a long call for a long time. But it does mean, in theory, everyone is equally present and able to participate. That's number one. And and therefore the room is not dominated by 2 or 3 people having a high level conversation driven by ego. There's a lot more opportunity to participate. Secondly, you can actually have more people participate. So in the past, there's been, working with major advertisers, you may have a core group of 6, 7 people maybe, but there's 25, 30 that really want to be involved. And when you're doing face-to-face pitches or traveling to pitches, it's not always possible for all those people to have any kind of, to hear or to experience the process. So now we can have extensions of teams. Over the years, it's been great. We're increasingly having CMOs or CFOs or even CEOs lean in. They can participate. And extension teams, brand marketing teams, product marketing teams, performance or e-commerce teams. the extended procurement teams can all be more easily be part of building that relationship. So we've got more stakeholders and more opinions, honestly, more opinions in decision-making and contribution to decision-making, if organized well, is beneficial. It's got to be beneficial because you don't have a small core team of media leaders then trying to sell the agency in across the organization after awarding them the business. So that's been really, really good. So we found that integration, that transition, that communication to the wider marketing organization has really benefited from it. The other thing we've seen from the agency side is less what we've over the years have called pitch theatre. And if you've been in an agency, any kind of agency pitch as the client over recent years, over the last 10 years, let's say, you'll have seen a lot of pitch theatre. Agencies entirely redecorating their lobbies and their foyers and their offices and pulling out the best biscuits and having to cater in the right way. And they invest a hell of a lot of stuff in the theatrical production of the pitch, which you can't do remotely. But we found some really interesting ways that agencies have kind of brought some of that theatre into remote pitches. It's so ingenious, really clever things, actually far more impressive actually than just lining the shelves with the client's product on the way in, which we've seen a lot of that stuff. So that's good. And that means that the agencies have actually been able to dedicate themselves really to put talent at the forefront, in the shop window, on the screen. It's all about getting to know the people. And in some peculiar way, you can actually do that better in a remote setting. And then the final thing is it's just cost everybody less money, which is really good because over the years when we've run these global pitches that are multi-regional, we've been flying around the world with the client and the agency leadership, and the bill of that is substantial. And so it's cut the cost of pitching both for the advertiser and the agency, and that's money that can go into making things better. So that's been really good. So from a practical point of view, it's been very positive, I think, and we've learned how to do it really well. The question is that format here to stay?
Yeah.
And if you're thinking about a pitch now, are you planning on a remote pitch, a face-to-face pitch? Is there a middle ground? Like how should you be thinking about it?
So I'm going to look at this both from the side of the brands, the clients, and from the side of the agency. There are many, many benefits of conducting remote pitches, as you've said, Tom, from the client side. But we've got to remember that this is a human business. This is a people business, and meeting the people you're going to work with is a critical component of any kind of selection process. So I think if you're a client going into a review season next year, thinking about where the key touch points are going to be within the process, where you want to bring your potential agency partners together with your brand teams is really, really important. And there are going to be kind of key stages when you want to do that in person. Perhaps it's the all agency briefing session where you're bringing to life the brief, you're inspiring the agency community. It's far easier to do that when you're seeing the whites of their eyes, when you're able to gesticulate and show the passion for your brand in front of them. Perhaps there's another moment within the process, like a chemistry meeting, where you want to begin to see culturally whether you can kind of work together. And then perhaps the third time is during the negotiations when you're trying to see whether you can kind of do a deal. The rest of it,
you've got to be able to grab onto someone's lapels, haven't you, in negotiation?
Well,
in real life.
Now it's a far more subtle, gentle approach. But there are moments within the pitch where you cannot diminish the impact of meeting your potential kind of working business partners. But so much of the fat, as you said, so much of the excess can be removed by conducting engagements remotely. Yeah. That's the first thing. The second thing I think is actually, using the environment of pitches to create a realistic dynamic. We had one pitch that we were working on this year where it was a chemistry meeting, but some of the stakeholders were going to dial in. They were going to dial in virtually in the way that actually many businesses will operate in the future. Yeah. And so the challenge for the agency was how to engage not only with the stakeholders that were physically in the room, but allow those people that were dialing in remotely to feel engaged and invested in the meeting, because that's going to be a critical component of any kind of business as usual working forward. And then the third thing from a client perspective is there is a greater obligation in virtual settings to be respectful.
Yeah.
And we've noticed the good and the bad of client behavior over the last 18 months. If you're listening to a presentation, your video has to be on. You have to be engaged in the content. Don't be distracted. Don't get up from your seat and disappear for 15 minutes to go and make a sandwich. It's just bad manners. So there is a greater obligation, I think, for good courtesy behavior if you are conducting components of the pitch on remotely. From an agency side of things, I think that there's the obvious thing is be organized. You've got to be super prepared, probably better prepared than you would be, pre-COVID pitching. Test your tech, make sure that there's nothing going wrong there. What we've also found is that agencies tend to be overly scripted. When there is an obligation to deliver remotely, and perhaps the timelines are tight, they haven't been able to rehearse in the same way that they used to be able to rehearse, they default to scripting. And when you're listening to somebody just reading a script, it feels like you're listening to a lecture. The energy goes, the passion goes, the humanity goes from the presentation, and that is a bad thing. If in doubt, don't script, don't read from a script. And the third thing I would say that has been highly effective in some of the pitches that we've worked with is where the agency doesn't just present, but they provoke discussion. They generate enough provocative content to actually engage with their prospective client through discussion. So fewer slides, less narrative delivery, more engagement would be the advice that I think I would give.
Yeah, it's good. And we've seen all of those examples. Apart from somebody leaving a pitch to go make a sandwich, I don't think I certainly haven't been. I wasn't in that meeting, whichever one that was. But yeah, I mean, being fully present is really, really key. And also, you put it in the context of you mentioned it earlier, of, changing the way that we are working. As ID Comms, we're a remote first business. We're a fully distributed model globally, and that works for us to be able to mobilize our teams wherever we need to do that. And majority of the work can be delivered remotely, and that's great. A lot of advertising, marketing work, working with agencies increasingly is going to be done remotely. All agencies are looking again at some form of not fully distributed model, maybe to the extent that we are, but some form of distributed model, increasing the use of outsourced or offshored resources. They're expanding their talent base out of key cities. So the inevitable working relationship between advertiser and agency is going to, by definition, be distributed and therefore largely remote. And so that's the way of working. So we've been really keen to just make sure that that's a reality, that's tested. This is not remote. We're not succeeding at pitches, but despite of the remoteness of it, we're trying to make it successful because of it, because that's actually how we will be working in the future. And we will come together at key moments in real life. And that's exactly what we try and design in the pitches, is to find those real moments. As you mentioned, the upfront briefing, really should be on the client's territory, right? That's the opportunity for the agency to come see that business at the upfront briefing. That makes a lot of sense. When you start doing these collaboration meetings, really should be on the agency's turf at that point, because then that's the client's opportunity to go, if they're allowed to and they want to, feel comfortable to, go onto the agency's property, go and get the sense of the culture and environment and the space, if that's important way to work. Negotiation can happen wherever it needs to be, at a local lawyer's office. Those are really important. So big context to really just think about, how do you want to really work with that agency in the future? And then we figure out the pitch design to be reflective of that as true as we possibly can. But good tips. So from our perspective, in our experience, obviously in the last 2 years, really, pitches have been planned remotely. We've got some examples of obviously spending time collaborating with agencies across a longer period of time, which has been really good. One thing that we've been doing as well this year is what we call the live buying exercises, which was specifically dedicated to programmatic buying, particularly, although it can work for anything. Was instead of just having an agency present to you, the narrative and the slides around their programmatic capabilities, which is probably what we've all done traditionally, we wanted to go further with that, and prompt by a client of ours just to look much deeper into how we can test for agencies' capability in programmatic buying. There's a lot to think about, and so we've set up kind of laboratory conditions over a period of time, funded with a budget. So it's a real campaign. We get 3 or 4 agencies active in this process as part of the overall pitch process. Give them clear briefing and objectives. And then we observe them very closely, which has been kind of interesting. Observe them very closely in terms of all the work they have to do in terms of setup, audience definition, tagging, technology setup, making choices about different data sources and technologies that they're going to use, and focus of that campaign. And then once live, how they react and optimize, either to market conditions or sometimes different, changing request or changing the brief. Yeah. That's been really interesting. We wouldn't have done that probably had we not been in remote. We wouldn't have done it in the same way, because no one's going to go sit in an agency for 6 weeks. So that things like that have allowed us to really innovate the pitch process like never before. That's been hugely valuable, and that will stay. That's only going to get more so and more and better.
Yeah. And another way that we've also kind of innovated, certainly recently, now that some more pitches are being conducted face to face, it's always struck me as a fairly big decision to make which agency partner on the back of a 3-hour presentation in a boardroom, perhaps with the best biscuits.
And you're going to mention the biscuits. I love the biscuits, the nice coffee. But what we've encouraged clients now to do is actually go and spend longer with potential agency partners. Go and spend 4 or 5 hours going and understanding, how they operate culturally also within an agency. Begin to get under the skin of that agency. It doesn't have to be overly formal. It doesn't have to be overly orchestrated, but it just gives you as a potential client greater opportunity to understand and feel what it could be like to work with that particular agency. And I think that will happen more and more, especially if there are fewer touch points within the process where client and potential agency can get together. So when you do get together, make sure that time is deeper and richer. Yeah, very good. So before we come on to answer I'm going to ask you the question, right, that we start with. So but just to say, we are in the process right now with a number of advertisers planning 2022 pitches in this way. And we have a clear kind of framework to help for decision making, what should be remote and what should be face-to-face if possible. If you're thinking about a pitch for next year and wrangling with whether to do it or not based on, we're going to be remote or not, happy to talk through some of that decision-making framework with you and help you make decisions, because pitches sometimes just have to happen. You just got to make it happen in the right way. I guess we're saying our view is, let's ask the question. So are remote pitches here to stay?
The answer is yes, but with some elements of personal connection through the process.
Yeah. So if you're thinking ahead to a pitch, that's the way to think about it. There are huge benefits from thinking of it remotely. You can get way more out of the process, but let us help you kind of identify when those get so much more value out of those face-to-face moments where it's worth investing the time to do that. And we think it's really important to protect. Okay, so we've answered the question. That's a good thing. Thank you for the question. Another question has just come in. If we can show it, Andy McCormick just picked up on the programmatic test. It's interesting. What did you learn from doing it? Great question, Andy. There's more to come on that, because we're going to be devoting some MediaSnack airtime to exactly that. There's been a lot of interest in that, as you might imagine. So appreciate the question. Keep watching. We've got more to come on that. Okay, so to wrap up, we're answering your questions. Please send them. We're getting some really good questions, and we're structuring, and Andy's one we will do as well, structuring episodes specifically around that, and we'll bring more evidence-based and tips for you in those scenarios. Let us know what you think. Leave comments down below from this episode or any others, and send us questions that you'd like us to review on a future show. Always ask, if you like this episode, please give it a thumbs up. It helps other people like you find this channel, which is really important. But that's it. See you next week.
Bye for now.